Hello everyone, and welcome to the second webinar in 12D's new Industry Solutions webinar series. My name is Lisa Stewart, and I'm the Marketing and Communications Coordinator here at 12D Solutions. While we wait for everyone to finish joining, I'll just pop a polling question up on the screen. You'll have about 30 seconds to answer about where your organisation is up to with ADAC, and then I'll show the results. Okay, it looks like we've got quite a variety of answers from attendees today. Okay, let's get started. Our Industry Solutions webinars are designed to provide insights into overcoming challenges in an evolving industry in more effective and efficient ways. We'll be running these regularly around this time of day and recording them for posting on our website and on YouTube. You'll be able to type your questions along the way, as shown on the screen, and we'll be answering as many as possible throughout this webinar. At the end of the presentation, I'll also read out some of the questions to the presenter for his insights. Today's ADAC Overview webinar will be presented by Dr. Lee Gregory, the Managing Director and Co-founder of 12D Solutions. Over to you, Lee.
Lisa, thank you very much. Yes, today I'm here to talk about ADAC and an overview of ADAC and how it actually arose. And basically, there's been an industry challenge, and that was providing asset information to local governments. Local governments now are requiring it and usually ask the construction firms to provide it to them. Unfortunately, there's three nasties that evolve with that. Each authority wants different information, different metadata, different formats. There's a whole variety of data formats, some are proprietary, which no one else can read. And even within the same authority, different staff can ask for different things. And the interchanging data between authorities have been almost impossible. So the local governments did realise that situation was very time consuming and actually costly for industry, which also means it is costly for them because we all on-bill that work to them. So a group of councils and water authorities met and decided that they would actually do 3 or 4 important things. They would actually all use common definitions for assets, metadata and attributes for those assets. They would also define and use just the one XML data transfer format for these assets. They would cover both as constructed and the design of assets, and they'd make those definitions in XML format freely available to industry. So they wanted to have open data. So this group formed ADAC, which is the asset design and as constructed. And these are 3 of the things from their charter, saying it's a non-proprietary data specification and transfer format. It's a national association of asset management practitioners drawn from government and private industry. But thirdly, it's also a governance and management entity. And it provides strategic planning, technical development training through the Institute of Public Works Engineering Australasia. So you have the IPWEA above it to look after everything. What the actual local government ADAC solution does, it's provided 3 things. The ADAC XML schema definition, and we'll have a little more look at that in a second. It's called an ADAC XSD. General ADAC guidelines for what each of the assets are and what you actually mean when you say information in the schema. And then each authority that's actually requesting ADAC would provide a localized version of those guidelines, specifying which assets they wanted, which metadata, and so on. You may wonder why that would occur, but at some authorities, they look after everything. They look after water, sewerage, parks, and so on. But in other places, you may have a water authority that looks after water supply and, say, sewerage. But the council looks after everything else. So in that case, depending which one you're talking to, they'll only require some things. So the idea with the ADAC and the ADAC XML is that the authorities can ask the file from industry and it'll be the same from everybody. Then they can take that file, which they know all about, and can load it into their different databases. Because there's a variety of things. It might be GIS, it might be an asset database, it could be into 12D model. It's just not going to one place. But more than that, it's really this is what the diagram is. You have your ADAC XML file in the beginning, in the middle. The people can read and write that. So all these different groups who can read and write ADAC XML, they can then transfer data between each other. So it's quite open to everybody. So it could even be for Joe Bloggs, who's just some individual somewhere. He has no problem reading and writing that data once he looks at the format. Initially, there were about 68 ADAC assets, and from the literature that shows things like water, transport, sewerage, stormwater, so on. And there's also work underway for things like bridges, buildings, coastal infrastructure, and pump stations. That ADAC consortium then just meets regularly to start adding more things to it. Now, what they actually do is they publish the ADAC XML schema, and that's in the form of a CHUM help file, and this defines everything in the ADAC XML file. So basically, I've expanded there on the right-hand side. It's showing you've got header information, which you call the project header, the name, the owner, the receiver, things like that, coordinate system, the surveyor and the engineer. Then you have project data, and that's where you have individual assets, say for sewerage, transport, water supply, and so on. When we actually get to the assets, they do have attributes and geometry. So, for example, here are the various attributes that go with a maintenance hole. So you've got chamber size. It could be rectangular, circular, or custom. If it's rectangular, it has a length underscore mm and a width underscore mm. And they're actually positive integers, and you have to have one of them, just one. So that's how far the definition goes. It goes down not only to give this hierarchy of where everything should be sitting, but we'll say that this value has to be something like a positive integer, or it has to be a bit of text. The good thing about that is that you can use that XSD to check a file again, so you can validate it before it goes anywhere to make sure it satisfies all these conditions. So they're the attributes, but you also have geometry. And the ADAC geometry can either be a point, a polyline, or a polygon. They may or may not have arcs in them, depending. The asset will say if you're allowed to have arcs in your polyline or polygon, but it's one of those, and the asset says which one it is. Now, the local authorities also have these guidelines, and again, this is one for Bundaberg, Gladstone, and Rockhampton, who took the general ones and then just localized them. And for example, for stormwater, the end structure, it was 1 point in the ADAC, and shows you here exactly what they want, the top of it, the head wall, and on the right-hand side, though, is more specific for those councils. These are the attributes, and they've got there whether or not they want them or not, whether they're mandatory. So a structural level underscore M is why it's mandatory, but something else like tidal gate, they don't wish it. So that's where it may be restricted for each council. Now, 12D in ADAC. As you see, ADAC is coming from a government group of people, and so the other thing about AR12D is how then do we implement and get involved with ADAC? Well, our approach is that we want to have ADAC data fidelity. That is, if we read in data from ADAC, we can read it in and hold all the information there, so there's no data loss. And luckily in 12D model, we have all those types of geometry, point, polyline, and polygon, and we also have hierarchical attributes, so we can hold that full attribute schema with no problems. The other thing we've done is that the ADAC editors and validators within 12D model are driven by that ADAC XSD. So that means we drive them from that information. That minimizes any implementation errors, and if there's a new schema, we can update to it very quickly. All the data in 12D model is 3D as required by ADAC, so there's no problems there. And in particular, we won't be able to round trip the data. So because we can hold it all, we could read in a file and write it out again, and there'd be no loss of information. We also want to integrate the ADAC data into the standard 12D model workflow, so our users don't have to learn a totally new set of things to do. And inside 12D model, we want to maximize the reuse of data. We don't want you to have to type in things twice. So by doing that, we minimize manual editing. So what I'm just going to do now, though, is actually demonstrate for you using ADAC inside 12D model. What I'll do first is I'll read in a file just to give you, see how anyone can read one in, say with 12D model, and then we'll go and look at how a designer and a surveyor produces an ADAC XML file and just explain the differences while we talk about two types of people. Right, so I'll just go up and open up a blank 12D model, and what I'm going to do is I'll just read in a ADAC XML. With ADAC inside 12D model, it's under our menu. There's actually an option for ADAC to do as such, which is the menu I've got here, or by just using the F12 button, it will bring up the menu. The other possibilities, we have some toolbars, and down the side here I've got a number of those ADAC options on the toolbars. So there's a variety of ways of getting access to it. So in this case here, I'm going to read in an ADAC XML file, and I've just picked it from the ones that are available here. I'm going to use a map file, and those people who've used 12D model, and most of you have, when we read in the data, we're able to map it into different models, different colors, and so on. We're also going to set any -999s to null Z values in 12D. We're going to create pipes and drainage pits from that data. So we've just read that in, the various data, and we'll just add that information. We split into these different models we read it in. I won't in the project header. We'll just add those on. So that's some ADAC data coming in. And if we now just look at that with a ADAC editor, so I'll just get up the menu and we go and edit one of these assets. And when we accept it, you can see this is the ADAC editor, and these for a lot, these are the various things you could have in it, and its geometry and the information here for those assets. So it's all come in from that particular file. I will go and show how we created this file, but this file could have come from anybody. So the information's all there, and we can use it for a variety of things. For example, we could use it to label. We could look at it in 3D. So this data, again, I'll just add the same data onto a 3D view. And so all the data that was visible, if there was a null Z value, then it won't show up on the 3D view, of course. So it's actually there, and you can see how you've got your round pits, rectangular pits, pipes, some of the pipes, and so on. So it is all proper 3D data. So that's an ADAC file. Another thing that you could potentially do with it would be actually to label it. And I'm just going to run a macro here at first to get the data ready. This is just tagging it so we can use it for updating. And so if we want to say label this data, we'll just label all that data in the view. And so this is an option we've got where we're going to use a file to say what do we want to do? Do we want leaders and so on? How do we actually want to label it? And I'll just run this data, and it's created a whole lot of label models which weren't there before. So what I might just do is we'll turn on, say, for lots. So we saw that lot information, and here we've just been able to label it. Similarly, I might turn on road islands, and in this case, we've actually labeled it with a leader because it wouldn't fit inside. So the data is all there, and you can use it to do all sorts of things. So you could turn on your stormwater manholes and pipes and so on. These are 12D model leaders, so they are intelligent leaders. So if you don't exactly like where they are, you can actually pick on them and say move them around out of the way and so on. So the information's all there to use. Now, how on earth did we create this data? Well, what we'll do now is go to a different project, and we'll actually look at some survey data and some design data. So in this case here, I've got some data in the left-hand model, and this is the data I'm going to send over to ADAC. And this is a 12D model designer, so he has got survey made for tins and things, but he's drawn up the drainage network and the sewerage network. So inside 12D model, they are actual pits and pipes and things. And being a 12D data, and so in this case, this whole string here is a whole drainage network. So in this case, we know a lot of information about it. The designer has all that information, so we can use that to go straight across the ADAC file. We could pick up particular things and create an ADAC asset, and that just allows us to go and pick one for a version. Depending on the point or polyline, we can actually manually do it. But what we do inside 12D model, we run what we call a chain and use a mapping file. And if you know what these things are going to be, you can say map all the manholes to ADAC manholes, pipes to pipes, and so on. So you don't have to do things manually. So I'm going to actually run this chain just to show you how it works. And we'll look at it a little bit more carefully later on. So we'll do the local design to ADAC chain. So it's processing the data. It's completing the chain. And you can see there, I've got the wrong view up there to look at the data in. It's actually now posted and put it up there. Now, if we now look at this data here, say with our ADAC editor, like we did before. So we're going to look at any ADAC data. So if we actually say pick on the pipe here, it actually goes and comes and it's a pipe, pressure pipe, and has all the information we picked up from there, the size of it, what type of pipe, and so on it is. So that all came straight from our ADAC definition, and similarly for any of the other data there as well. So in that case, this was a road area, and so we went through the pavement with information about the pavement. So that's how all the design needs to do, set up the mapping file inside 12D model, and then you can process as such. Now for a surveyor, and so I'll just get some survey data there, and on the right-hand screen, I'm going to this time have my plan ready to go to ADAC for a surveyor. The difference between a surveyor and a designer is that he wouldn't have a lot of that drainage information. So when he picks it up in the field, it's there as just separate points and separate lines and things. So this information here is just being picked up in the field, and it's just a point. And this will just be a polyline, potentially with a size to it. What you do have, though, is that when the surveyor picked it up in the field, he could pick it up with attributes. In this case, this one came in from the field. It had information that it was a pipe, had certain material status and things like that. And what we're able to do, we're able to take those attributes from the surveyor and map them into ADAC assets. And this can be all user defined. So all these things that you're able to pick up in the field, you can have go straight across to ADAC. It's just unfortunately for the surveyor, he has to pick them all up where the designer has them all in the design. So to process data, it's exactly the same sort of thing as we did before, except we'll be using a survey chain to produce it because it's got different type of data in it. So again, we'll run the survey chain, and it's actually produced that data. Now, if we look at one of those things again, we'll actually see that it's come across as ADAC data. Just like before, it's labeled it, but also this other information that we're looking at, say a sewer pipe or a sewer manhole, if we looked at that, it's going, in this case, as a non-pressure pipe and various attributes for it. So no one had to enter those, they were just picked up from the attributes. You could add extra information in, and there's various ways we can do that as well. So now that we have this data, what can we actually do with it? Well, there's a few other items on here. We can actually validate it. Now, what does that mean? Well, that actually means we validate against the ADAC schema. So what we can do is we can run and we can produce a report, but I won't worry, we'll just hit validate, and it's coming up and saying, ooh, there's an error in there. So there's actually an error. The information says that sewer connection type Fred is not a correct value. Now, where is that? I can see right there where it is. And if I double click on it, it will take us back into that editor. And so basically what happened was that the value we had, which was Fred, was not valid for a type. So the only types were available, and this comes all from XSD with these types. So we have to have one of those. So that's an error. So we can validate it. We can actually report on it. So what I'm going to do is I'll report on this data. And again, I'll report on the whole lot. So I'll pick all the data in the model. You could pick part of it. Now, one thing we need is what we call a header string. This one, there's one over, you can see it stands out. If I actually have a edit that and see what that is, you need one of these for each project. And what it basically is all that header information that was metadata for the whole project. So things like your coordinate system, the surveyor, the engineer, and so on. So we need that to put into our report. And I have one set up there, but you'd set up one with you may already have them set up with all people's names and that. I'll produce an HTML file. We'll call him Fred since that was the offending value there. So it's now producing the report for all that data that we saw on the screen. So here's the header information we had, and then in this case it's giving us sewerage manholes, a number of columns of them, all the major information, and the XY coordinates. So you've got your manholes, your pipes, and so on. And you don't have to do everything, you can pick just some to report on. So we can validate it, we can report it, and we can actually write it out. And to write the data out, it's basically write an ADAC file. And in this case, we'll just pick all this information. We need this header again. And basically, we just say, write it out. Now, that ADAC file I wrote out was exactly the one I read in earlier on. So it did come from me in this case, but it could have come from anybody. So that's the slight differences between design and surveyors, but that's just the sort of information they have to go with. But reading a file in is the same for everybody. So we've gone through things we need to demonstrate. So in summary, we had this industry nightmare of everyone wanting something different. You couldn't transfer information, and even within the same authority, they didn't know, they would ask for different things. And the solution from the local government was open data. So by doing that, by having common definitions, one XML data transfer format, and make them public to everybody, everything's right. A very, very important thing there, as you saw in the before, is this one XML data transfer format. If you don't have a data transfer format, it's like having half a bridge. And what's the use of going to the middle of the river if you can't get to the other side? So if you've only got common definitions and metadata and attributes, it's useless. You need this transfer format as well. So this solves the problem of each authority wanting something different because they're getting together and agreeing for once, so they all use the same thing. Everyone in authority then uses the same definitions, and they don't want different formats. There's one format. So once you can read from one of them or write them, you can do it for everybody in the ADAC group. And that allows them to easily interchange asset data between different authorities and then within to anybody. And one thing I didn't mention, though, that came up is this XML format is really a 1,000-year archiving solution, because XML comes to www consortium, so virtually all the information on the internet is in XML format. So if your data is in that with a definition, it should mean in 1,000 years' time, they should still be able to read XML data back. If they can't, there's a lot of other problems going on in this world. So your data will be good for 1,000 years. 12D model and ADAC, well, we totally support the local government open standard because we believe it's great to be able to interchange data. The production and reading of the ADAC XML files has been totally integrated into our standard 12D model workflow for both designers and surveyors, which I showed. And ADAC is actually free of charge for our users on maintenance. So that's the 12D quick overview of the 12D model ADAC solution.
Thank you, Lee. Now I believe we have time for just a couple of the questions that came through. Lee, Matt from Sydney has asked, what does an ADAC XML file actually look like?
Ooh, you caught me out there. I missed part of my demonstration. If I actually go back in, sorry about that, I'll just get up the ADAC as though we're going to write one. So I'll get just one of these options up. And in here we can say pick the one of those there, and I'm just going to go and open it up. Right, sorry about that. That's actually what an ADAC XML file looks like. At first thought it's pretty horrendous, but once you see, look, here's the word ADAC maintenance hole, and then there'll be an ending record and all that information. So it's actually quite good. And being an XML file, the editors like this is Notepad++, you can close bits, bring them out again. So that's what it actually looks like.
Good stuff. Thanks for that, Matt. Also, a number of people, Lee, would just like to clarify the price of ADAC, please.
Yes. With it, it's actually for our people on maintenance, our users on maintenance. It's in version 11. It's only in version 11 onwards, and actually then there's free charge for in those modules. For just reading and writing, it's just in the base. If you're going to be using drainage networks, and that you just need the drainage module, it's part of it. But for surveyors, they don't need that. It's all just in the base part.
Thanks, Lee. That's all we've got time for in the live Q&A today. Thank you everyone for your great questions. We'll be answering you individually after this session if we weren't able to get to your question during the Q&A. The recording of this webinar will be available in coming days on our website and on our YouTube channel. Please also feel free to download the handout from this webinar, which you should be able to see. Our next two webinars will be Task Management on the 23rd of February and Drainage 2D on the 9th of March. We'll update the website with many more topics in coming weeks and also keep you posted through email and social media. If you need to contact us in the meantime, our details are on the screen now. That concludes our presentation for today. Thank you for attending. We hope to see you at our future webinars.